Welcome to the Black Doctors Talk podcast. I am Dr. Kimberly West, host for this episode and member of the Black Doctoral Network. Today, I am joined by Dr. Deion Hawkins. Dr. Hawkins is an assistant professor of argumentation and advocacy and the director of debate at Emerson College. He is an expert in social marketing and critical race theory, with his current research operating at the intersection of intercultural and health communication, focusing on ending police brutality and increasing authentic white allyship. Additionally, Dr. Hawkins is a nationally recognized debate coach. He is one of the few coaches in the country with multiple debate and speech national championships. In 2019, he was awarded the Bob Derryberry Award for his work and excellence among new forensic educators. Welcome, Dr. Hawkins. I am so excited to speak with you today.
Thank you. I'm excited, and thank you for the invitation. I'm excited for the conversation today.
Yes. So let's get our conversation started with you telling our listeners and our viewers a little bit about your background. So where does it all begin for you?
Yeah, okay. So I will say the first thing is that I'm a weird mix because what I teach is different than what I research and what my doctorate is in. So we can kind of work in reverse. So my PhD is in health communication. I was definitely wanted to focus on critical perspectives of health and health equity, and with a specialization in social marketing, which is health campaigns using marketing techniques for behavior change. But the reason how I ended up being an assistant professor of argumentation and advocacy is I have been involved in competitive public speaking and debating, otherwise known as forensics, since I was 13. And so throughout my whole collegiate journey, that has been a kind of a linchpin of my experience and a passion and a purpose of mine. So for example, I went to college. My undergrad at Ohio State was in English education. My desire was to go be a high school teacher and run my own speech and debate team. And I was recruited by someone to coach at the master's level, at the graduate level. And so at Marshall University, that's when I discovered health communication. And that was a big moment of switching what I wanted to do. I quickly learned at that moment I wanted to be a professor. And so, at that moment, and that was back in 2012 is when I graduated undergrad and transitioned to graduate studies. And that was at Marshall University in West Virginia. And so it was a very eye-opening experience in terms of health communication. And then I realized that that's what I wanted to focus on, particularly health inequities, especially for the Black community and more specifically the Black gay community. Then I went to get my PhD at George Mason, and I've coached speech and debate throughout my entire collegiate career. I competed, and then from 2012 until now, I still coach and have been coaching. So it's a very weird mix because I don't necessarily research argumentation, but it has been a core part of who I am in my life now for 18 years. So.
Okay, nice. Big ups to Ohio State. That's my backyard. Woo woo.
Okay,
Um,
yeah, there we go.
all right, there we go. Listen, I don't live in Ohio anymore, but every time you see someone, you go OH.
OHIO. There you go. Yeah.
Exactly. You know, you know how that works.
Yeah.
So you were talking a little bit about your professorship in argumentation and advocacy. Can you talk about that a little bit more, and what type of work does that entail?
Yeah, absolutely. So I teach largely argumentation and advocacy classes within the Department of Communication Studies at Emerson. And so kind of how the course operates is the first month or so is a very kind of breakdown of argumentation in general. So we will talk about Toolman model, like claim data warrant, impacts, analysis, audience analysis. And then what I encourage students, or what we do in class, I should say, is we take that and then apply it into different fields or different sectors, right? So some students may be journalism majors, some students may be political communication, some students may be visual media arts. And what I have them do is understand that argumentation happens every day. And I really want them to expand their scope of what an argument is and not think that it's just like political debates. So we have kind of modules where we talk about argumentation in the business context, right? So we do a Shark Tank activity. And I'm like, every time you see someone on Shark Tank, they're making an argument, right? A pitch is an argument. Talk about interpersonal arguments, in the legal context, political context, and then one of my big things is I'm very passionate about social justice. I'm very passionate about equity. So we always end the semester with a social justice advocacy project where they're able to apply all of the skills that they have learned to some social justice issue that they care about. And what I have discovered is that it's a skill set that is rarely taught outside of my classroom. And so students love the ability to be able to say, this is what I care about, and like, I'm going to advocate for it. Yeah, I love it. And I love it because it's never a dull moment, right? Some people's response to an argument is going to be different every semester. So it always keeps me on my toes.
Wow. Yeah, I think that's interesting. You said that people aren't exposed to that other than your class.
Yeah. So a lot of time, I talk to my colleagues about this all the time. A lot of times they are taught very specific things. So like journalism in a class, for example, may learn a style of journalistic writing that has an argument in it, but they're not really told necessarily how to respond or how to break down other arguments. So a lot of times people are familiar with the claims they want to make, but what I encourage people to do in the class is say, okay, but you need to be able to identify other arguments and break down those arguments. And if you do want to respond, be able to formulate a response that's like comprehensive and cohesive and makes sense.
Wow. Yeah, that makes sense. There's a lot to debate and a lot going on, and you also do some advocacy work. Can you talk a little bit about your advocacy work? Have you worked with any students or anyone in the field with things that has been going on in the political realm, with movements, with things? I see you have Black Lives Matter, you know,
Yes.
in the back. You know, what has that been like in this kind of political climate we've been in as of lately?
Yeah, so I can kind of I'll give three examples. So a first example is I was actually teaching rhetoric of social movements last summer.
Mm.
And so we were mid-semester when, things, escalated, and we had kind of I would like to say a moment of racial reckoning. And in that moment, I had to really alter the trajectory of my class because I was like, we cannot ignore what is going on right now. Like, I would be doing a disservice as someone who is a Black Lives Matter and critical race scholar, and I also would be doing a disservice to my students. And so that's kind of one example of how it kind of shifted. But and I absolutely have had students ask me about like mobilization, about what do I think made this different, right, than the past. And so yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think of other tangible kind of examples, but I would also say that as one of the few people of color in the department, that I always make it my point to bring up issues of equity, especially as it relates to race. And I'm never afraid to kind of call out when I think something is inequitable. And I don't know if I would have been that person before
Mm.
last summer, right? I think last summer really opened the eyes to a lot of people, but it also opened my eyes to say, like, okay, well, a lot of people do turn to you for advice on certain things, and that lean into that opposed to wondering, like, why do these people want my opinion? It's like, well, it happened enough. So I was like, okay, I need to embrace it and really try to help people when they come about issues of being an ally, or what more could I do, or help me contextualize this, etc.
Yeah, I think that's a really powerful position because, as you said, people, they may feel helpless and may not know where to go, and it's good that you're there in that capacity to say, this is how you can handle this, from multiple perspectives. Because I think sometimes people don't realize, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, white allyship is important
Yes.
um, to moving things along and to having an impact in the work that is done.
Absolutely. And like you just said, lots of people disagree with that statement. I have lots of my colleagues who say like, it's not, your labor, it shouldn't be your labor. And I tell them, I do to some extent wholeheartedly do believe that it is not my labor, right? So if one of our colleagues comes and says, Deion, what's a definition of systemic racism? That's something that they can go find on their own, right? So like those sorts of things I'm not going to engage in. But if someone comes to me and says, listen, I want to do better, I don't know how to do better, I'm more than happy to assist, because I would rather you do that and lean on someone that you can trust opposed to not doing it at all. And an example I always give people is, I consider myself to be a feminist, but there are still going to be times that I need to turn to my women identifying friends to say, what more could I be doing? And it's like, and so I always like to give that analogy, because to me, it's been effective, because people really see that if it's coming from a good place, there is a way to really help people move the needle forward. And I also say on the flip side, I wholeheartedly understand my colleagues who say, I don't have the capacity to do that. Right. Like I recognize that and respect that. And it's like, I do. And it is something that I am passionate about. And that's why I am kind of, in the process of researching and that topic in particular.
Yeah. And I know you're also an expert in social marketing and critical race theory. And so I just wanted to talk a little bit about critical race theory. I know in my field of education in particular, it's been a hot button issue recently in the news. And so for those who may not be familiar with CRT, why is it an important lens to understand the world through?
Absolutely. So I think it's important to kind of give context to critical race theory. It started as a legal field, and it was really interested in looking at kind of race and power and how systemic racism is usually embedded in laws and embedded in policy. And it really started to give us language for understanding systemic and structural racism, opposed to saying like racism is only individual acts, or racism is only being called, the N-word or another racial slur or something like that. And so that's one thing I would say, is that it really is an analysis. It's a lens to look at not just quote unquote blatant acts of or overt acts of discrimination or racism, but to really look at and unpack how racism is built into systems and into policies. And for something like education, it gives us, first of all, a lens, in my opinion, to look at history appropriately, right? So it gives us being able to, for example, in my field of study with policing, critical race theory helps us understand how the current manifestations right now of policing stems from slave patrols, right? Like we can't just magically forget that that's what happened. Absent of critical race theory, or that kind of lens would not be really analyzed. And so what we're seeing right now in education is a lot of people trying to hold feet to the fire and saying, we need to be teaching that, racism does exist, and that racism has existed throughout history in our country. And it's just changed and manifested itself in different ways. And so the issue with that people have with that, obviously, is that a lot of people say, they don't benefit from white privilege, or they'll say, I'm not racist. And it's saying like, that's, every time I hear that, I'm like, that is a fundamental misunderstanding of what critical race theory is, right? Like the whole argument is that we move past colorblindness and move past this idea that it's one-on-one actions, and really look at, okay, what is embedded in this education? As you know, there are places where like Black students can't wear their hair naturally, right? Critical race theory would say that critical race theory gives us the lens and the language to say that policy is systemically racist.
Wow. I like the way you summed it up there. And I thank you for that perspective, because again, sometimes people take words and they make them buzzwords and
Yep.
not have a full understanding. Even some people within our community don't necessarily understand what critical race theory is. And so I appreciate you putting that into a perspective and then into some application so people can get a good idea and then maybe share with others
Yep.
what that means. So I appreciate that and thank you. And so who has had a tremendous impact on your career?
Oof, that's such a good question. And I would say, and again, for it's going to be lengthy because it's for people because I've had in different ways, right? So, the first one I would say my dissertation advisor, Gary Krebs, because he really introduced me to another level of thinking in health communication and another lens in terms of critical approaches to health and community-based engagement. And if it's not with the community, then it can't be for the community. Dr. Mark Hobson, who was also on my dissertation committee, and he has been incredibly influential just because he was a Black male, and he was always willing to push me, especially when we were talking about brutality, to have conversations in the academy that other people weren't having, and that, quite frankly, some people were telling me don't have. And then Andy Spildinner, Dr. Andy Spildinner would be another individual. And I will say him because I met him early in my career back in 2014. And he was one of the first people to say, like, you need to be a professor. And then Dr. Tamika Robinson at Hofstra University on the debate side. She has been a fantastic mentor. And she's one of the few people who also exists in the debate space and the health comm space. And so she has been an incredible shoulder to lean on. Anytime I need advice, she has always been the person who really knows how to navigate both worlds.
Wow. And it was okay. It was 4 people, just so you know. I mean,
sometimes people like, oh, one person. I'm like, I don't want to do a disservice to the folks who helped me get here.
Exactly. Yeah. So you said you've been awarded for your work in debate. You're one of the few coaches in the country. Can you talk a little bit about what do you do? How does that work?
On the debate side?
On the debate side.
Yeah, absolutely. So I tell people all the time, I have naturally been inquisitive and naturally been combative. So when I was 13 going into middle school, they were asking like, oh, what electives would you take? And my mom saw debate and she was like, okay, you don't have a choice. And like literally since then, it's been no turning back. And it really has given me, I would say it's a passion. So coaching of debate is a passion of mine. And what I discover is that a lot of students love it because it's constantly changing and it's always kind of a brain exercise, right? And it's a way for people who don't like sports, for example, to always be competitive. And just to give kind of an overview of how it could work for people to understand is, so there's different types of debate. And speech and debate has different events or different genres. So if you think of it like track and field, you know how track and field has like field events, but they'll have high jump, long jump. Yeah. And on the track, you have like sprints, distance, middle distance, same thing in speech and debate. There's so many different areas, so many different types of speeches. But I'll highlight the form of debate that I coach now is called IPDA debate. And let's say you and I are debating each other. We'll have 5 topics, have no idea what those topics are beforehand. We take turns eliminating the topic that we don't want. Then we end up with one. Each of us has 30 minutes to prepare our arguments for that topic. And then we come back in 30 minutes and then the debate happens. And so, yeah. And everyone always gives me that face when I tell them,
wow.
Yeah. And so it really is. That's why I say it's never a dull moment, right? Because for example, practice is I tell students, and you also can't control what side you're on. Right.
Okay. So yeah, that's what I was going to say. What if you both come back and you have the same opinion?
Yeah. So you don't control what side you're on. So a part of coaching is, one part is having them kind of constantly like in tune and abreast of various issues happening in the world. But a whole other side is saying like, I can't coach you at a tournament, right? Once we're at a tournament, they are on their own. to make it through. So it's like really teaching them skills and structure has been such a big part of what my kind of passion is, because I tell them, I'm like, once it's 8 a.m. at the Saturdays when the tournament starts, I'm here after a round, but during prep and what happens in round, that's on you. And so, yeah, and that's why I really try to practice rounds, team practice, have students record themselves, write themselves their own ballots, a lot of peer coaching. Yeah, so that's just, I would say, kind of an overview of my debate coaching and experience.
Okay. All right. That sounds good. I mean, again, I was just interested in, oh gosh, what do I do if I come back and I have the same argument as somebody else? I got to think on the fly.
And there are times, even when I was debating, there are times where you end up with a resolution and you are working with no knowledge at all. And you just have to spend 10, 15 minutes really researching. And that's another thing, is I teach students how to research more effectively, because if you go from no knowledge at all, like one time a student 2 semesters ago had something about the Department of Treasury. And he was like, I had no idea what this resolution was about. And he had to figure it out. And I tell people, it's not always what you believe in, it's what you can defend. There are different types of debates that's explicitly what you believe in, but the form we do is, if you can defend it and you can formulate the argument, that's what matters. And I tell students this all the time, like, that is also a skill set that's going to be able to help you in the real world, interviews, pitches, any of it.
Oh, wow. I'm just fascinated by that. What I know, you said you don't necessarily work in your dissertation field, but what advice would you give to someone who's willing to pursue a career, whether you want to talk from the higher ed perspective, or what advice would you give someone who's maybe listening to you talk about your various perspectives? What advice would you give them?
Yeah, 2 things. So first, on the debate side, I would say, a lot of people have this idea that you can't make a career out of coaching, or that there is some limit of coaching. I would tell people that is empirically not true. I can name dozens of people who have either used the skills that they learned in debate and adapted them for nonprofits, for corporate America, or people who have used those skills and went into the academy. And it's like any other thing. You have to actively go out and apply the skills. And on the health communication side, what I would say is, I would say specifically to Black scholars, is that there may be times where other people may not see the value of your research, but that is not because it is not valuable. It's because they don't understand that experience. And so I always tell people, the reason why I continue to study health communication and publish in health communication is because, if I am not having these conversations, there may not be other people to have these conversations. And I've never, quite frankly, been in the business of comfortability of people. The best conversations, the ones that are going to move anything forward, are going to be uncomfortable. And we, as Black academics, if we left the room every time we felt uncomfortable, we would almost never be in the room, right? And that's why I tell people, it's like, don't let other people's uncomfortability dictate what you're doing or what you study, because that's not why you're here, and follow your passions. Yeah.
I think you said a word there about that uncomfortability part.
Yeah.
Yes. I mean,
all the time.
Yes, you have to own it, and you have to own your space.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Because you can get pushed out, right? Or you can, and it's like, and to be clear, I'm not telling people to be subjected to, racism and discrimination. But what I'm saying is that, there can be times where you may be the only person who feels a certain way in the room. Don't stay silent. You're there for a reason. And if you're not going to say it, then other people may not. And that's also a testament, perhaps, to people that are around the table with you. So I would just say, we've worked hard to get where we are as Black academics, and it's like, refuse to be silent once you get a seat at that table.
All right, now listen, you done said some stuff here.
Yeah.
What is your biggest accomplishment to date?
Ooh. So I'm a naturally a altruistic person. So I would probably say honestly, being able to see so many students grow. Because the thing about coaching is that when I started coaching in 2012, I have dozens of students now who are in PhD programs. I have dozens, you know what I mean? And so it's amazing to be able to see the growth of students that I saw at like 19 or 20 become like actual friends. And it's one of the things too about debate is that very few people are like great when they start. And
Mm.
so many students tell me, um, you saw something in me that I did not see in myself. And they say, like, I will forever thank you for that because that has shaped me in so many ways. And every time I look back on that, or every time I hear that, I tell them it really is honoring and humbling because my debate coach was that for me. All the way back in high school. And so I've always told her, if I could ever make a student feel the way that you made me, halfway the way that you made me feel, like I will always feel accomplished. So yeah, I would say for me, by far, my greatest and proudest accomplishment is seeing the growth of so many former students kind of come into their own.
Yeah, no, that I, as an educator, I can understand that.
Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing.
And so I hear you. So you sound like you give a lot. You're there for others. But what inspires you? What gives you life?
Um, That's a great question. I would say my upbringing and my background. I am a first generation college student. My parents are blue collar workers. They are the typical Midwest story factory, post office. And so it was really beyond their wildest dreams and my wildest dreams growing up that, someone could go and get a PhD. And it also, what drives me is that like I said earlier, oftentimes I am the only Black person in the room. I'm almost always the only Black queer person in the room. And so I very quickly learned early on that I'm already different. Right, so it's like you can either like embrace the difference and figure out how that can work for you, right? Or you can, try to hide it. And, obviously for a long time, it takes you to get to a place of self-acceptance. But then it's like, once you see it, it's like, and I will never forget this. One of the mentors that I talked about earlier told me, she was like, never forget that your authenticity can be your greatest asset.
Mhm.
And from then on, I was like, that's it. And so yeah, what drives me is that there's not a lot of people from my experience and my background that are in the academy. And that's not because they shouldn't be. It's because, quite frankly, I think there's so many barriers.
Mhm.
And I tell people I was just lucky to have the type of intelligence that academia decides to applaud, right? And so yeah, absolutely.
No, that's wonderful. How has your affiliation with the Black Doctoral Network helped you personally and or professionally?
So I would say definitely I attended, when did I attend the conference? I think it was 2016. And I was able to converse and have a panel with two other colleagues of mine that were also Black gay men. And it was a great opportunity to highlight kind of, because we all focus on kind of the field of HIV work, but in different capacities, right? So someone was a social worker, epidemiologist, and I'm a communication expert. So that would be one. And then the second thing I would say is, during COVID, it has really been great being able to see the various webinars, these talks have been good because it really is easy to feel like you're alone in a Black academic, as a Black academic. And I am in Boston, it is very lily white and very racist, quite frankly. Yeah, I call it, I keep it real. I call it what it is. And yeah, and so it's so good to know that there's a network out there, and it's like that can be there, or that is there when needed, because this experience is unique, right? Academia is a unique field. It really does not operate like other fields. And so, having a conversation, okay, well, last year, for example, having access to Black academics who are trying to navigate research and teaching while having literal systemic trauma, right? Like it was like, okay, I'm not the only person that is burned out or feels like I cannot teach right now. And that the network gives a great, then it literally provides the network for that.
Yeah, I know. I'm thankful that I'm a member. We have a
Yep.
lot of great opportunities to just even share with each other, as you said. So, Dr. Hawkins, what is next for you?
Ooh, that's so. Uh, in a perfect world, I would love to. So I want to stay in academia. But I would love to eventually move up the ladder and be able to be a person that can really institute systemic change. I love my college. Yeah. So shout out to Emerson College. I love where I am. I love my department. So yeah, I would love to be, chair, dean, provost one day. But I also am very, very much so in tune with other issues going on outside of academia. So next is I really want to get into the DE&I consulting area because that is an area where I feel that quite frankly, again, it's largely ran by progressive white women. And that can be great, but then there are certain things where I'm like, okay, well, these sorts of conversations should be led by a person of color. And so yeah, so that would be one of my next immediate steps, is to really branch into the DE&I kind of consulting world, assessment, strategic planning, help people in any capacity that I can with those things.
Wow, this has been a really great conversation. Just listening to you and all the different little nuances in the work that you do, it's been really really interesting. So I'm so thankful that I had the opportunity to speak with you this afternoon.
Thank you. I appreciate the conversation, and thank you for being so, cordial and relatable. You never know how these things are going to go, and so yeah, I love it. It's great. I appreciate it.
No, it's a pleasure. I do. It's been a pleasure to speak with you. And so before we sign off this afternoon, can you tell our viewers and listeners where they can go to learn more about you and the work that you're doing?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am one of those kind of weird people that does not have much social media. I know that that is a crazy thing to say, but I am more than happy to discuss anything or hop on a Zoom call. If you just email me at Deion_Hawkins at emerson.edu, or literally if you put in to Google like Deion Hawkins Emerson College, my information will pop up. And that's the easiest way to contact me. Yeah, so like I'm not on Twitter, LinkedIn, any of those things. But yeah, I will be more than happy to talk extensively or more about any of the things that I've mentioned. Especially if there's areas for partnerships, collaboration, or if there's any young people who are looking for advice or mentorship. I'm very passionate about that as well, because a lot of what I've learned, I've had to trek through and trial and error. And if I can prevent other people from many errors, I will, and just go to the success part instead of the trial and error, and go on the right path immediately. So yeah, that would be the best way to contact me.
Well, okay, great. And I like that because that's personable. You're saying contact me directly. And,
Absolutely. Yeah, contact me directly. Deion_Hawkins at emerson.edu.
okay, that sounds good. All right. So again, thank you.
Thank
And
you.
And to those who are watching, please be sure to stay connected to the Black Doctoral Network and connect with us on all of our social media channels. Thank you today for joining the Black Doctors Talk podcast. I hope you will join us again next time. But for now, please be sure to like, share, subscribe, and to tell a friend.